See Mr. Dana Senate here. Would you please stand and lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up is the disclosure of conflict of interest. Is there anybody that has a conflict of interest with the votes they'll take tonight? Seeing as none, we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Could I get a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? There is no unfinished business, so we will move on to new business. First up, Resolution 220, 2019.
A resolution providing for appointing R. Neil Patterson to the Planning Board. Be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Waterville, acting as municipal officers as follows, that the City Council hereby authorize the appointment of R. Neil Patterson to the Planning Board with a term to expire in 2020.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you, Neil. Give us a wave so we can see you out there. All right. Next, Resolution 221, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for issuance of a pole permit to Consolidated Communications and Central Maine Power Company on Front Street.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Next, Resolution 222, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for issuance of a pole permit to Central Maine Power Company on Streamview Drive.
Move to adopt.
And second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Resolution 223, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for approval of redesign plan for concourse.
Move to adopt.
And second.
And I see Michael is at the podium.
Well, this has been a long time coming, so fortunately we're here to present something to you, which I think is going to be a very good way to add some extra spaces to the concourse. People in the audience don't have a copy of this. There are some more copies in the front seat. It was last spring that we started the whole process about talking about redesign of the parking spaces in the concourse. The council authorized the hiring of an engineering firm, CES, and they came up with a number of options to present. We spent a lot of time at the staff level, and some of you were involved too, in sorting through the options. We came up and decided to present 3 different options to the parking committee. And finally, after quite a few meetings with the parking committee, they've agreed to accept our recommendations about what we call option B. And that one, which would add 76 spaces, we think adds the most spaces with the least amount of cost. But I'm going to let Nick, our city engineer, go into that a little bit further. And I've asked him to give us all a quick history of the concourse out back, because it's got quite a long and interesting history, I think, as to how the parking out back evolved over time. And you presented that to the parking committee earlier this fall. And I think it was a helpful explanation of just how did it come to be the way we see it today.
Thanks, Mike.
Speak right into the mic.
Do you have the, sorry. And view full screen. So I just wanted to take everyone back in time a little bit. This is 1955, an aerial from an old tax map that we had in town. You'll see in the middle there, it's upside down, it says Charles Street. Main Street is down below. you'll see Temple Street at one point in time had connected to Elm Street. Of course, that's been disconnected with the urban renewal. And you'll see all the buildings in throughout this particular lot. I mean, it extends all the way to the north and south, obviously to Spring Street as well. And with the urban renewal, a lot of those, many of those buildings were removed and created into a municipal parking lot. So this kind of gives you the first, there we go. So taking you up to 1996. In this photo, you'll see an outline of what used to be the old Morning Sentinel building. And in it, after the urban renewal design, you'll see just a blanket of pavement with striped lines. And in fact, there were angled parking stalls all along the concourse here. And in 1997, that was about the time that we received some grant funds to do a redesign, which in fact started in 1989, and I'll get to that shortly. 2003 shows the redesign of the concourse. In it, you'll see a few different features that came out of the Concourse Redesign Committee discussed back in 1989 and again in the mid-90s. That being green space and added trees to try to soften the look of the asphalt, to try to bring a more comforting feel as you enter the concourse on both sides off of Main Street and off of Spring Street as well. In this design, you'll see a curvilinear road that is mentioned in previous design committees, and this was a particular design that was accepted generally in 1989, and then when we got the money in 1995, there was again a series of public hearings that took us to this point. And then 2019 today, you can see, and I'll just kind of revert back to the previous one. The difference between this one is obviously you can see the statue is still in the center here, and we've since taken that out. And now you can see it's now kind of a more smooth ride as you go through the concourse. We certainly don't have the disruption of truck traffic going through as well, and you can see obviously some of the trees have grown over that time span as well. And the reason why we wanted to kind of take you through this is that this concourse has seen a number of different designs over the years. And you know, going back to you know, the old 1996 drawings, or excuse me, the aerial photo, you'll see that there is no clear direction or clear path from Main Street to Spring Street. We of course had a portion of Silver Street that was now one-way, disconnected with the urban renewal design. But the complaint and the reason why the city had established a redesign committee at one point in time was to, one, try to get a definitive pattern for traffic. And a lot of the concerns at the time was that traffic patterns, you know, in order to get to this intersection from Main Street, you had to traverse around in front of businesses, creating conflict points for pedestrians, thus making it unsafe for pedestrian traffic. So one of the other pieces that came out of it was a better pedestrian access through and across the concourse parking lot. And you'll see that that was established with this kind of teardrop design with a concrete sidewalk connecting both sections. And taking you through, this is I'm not going to go through it, but I'll just show you that there's been extensive discussion on this, and a lot of the points discussed back in this memo in August 30th, 1989 from the Concourse Redesign Committee. A lot of these points we're actually you know, still talking about today. That being the number of stalls, if we had enough. At the time, the concern was the Sentinel building. And of course, now we're talking about this building that we're sitting in right now. And so we've discussed those items, you know, at different parts of the committee discussion. And I think this memo really kind of sums up, you know, how much effort the city has put in. You know, you look right here. This outlines 9 different planning sessions, totaling over 250 citizens providing input for those planning sessions. In addition to that, you're going to see how much we spent. I mean, we were spending $1.2 million. So there was a significant investment into the concourse as we were considering this at that point in time. And that brings us to kind of where we landed with this redesign. And I guess what I'll say is that while the old design had some, I would say, minor design flaws, that being the center statue. And I believe the intent at one point in time was to utilize the park space that we see here in this teardrop design. So in order to minimize the impact after we have this build grant and two-way project on Main Street and Front Street and try to maintain some sort of normalization downtown, especially with traffic flow, we decided to take it and keep the same design but optimize the space that we're not using right now. And so with this redesign and restriping, you'll see that at the current design and behind it, you'll see it kind of curves down, curves down, curves down. With the redesign and restriping, we're able to add over existing number of stalls today, another 76 stalls. And that's the proposal that we brought to the parking committee, in addition to a couple of other concepts that we just felt would be more of a disruption and cause more headache later on after the build grant project goes through, that this would provide, again, just a known route through and into the downtown area, especially traffic coming from KMD that might be entering the concourse via Spring Street. So.
So we should have mentioned, too, at the beginning, that the reason we're bringing it to you now is the next step in this process is for us to take a design, whether it's this one or another one, back to the engineering firm to get a price. So if anyone was going to ask tonight, how much will this cost, we really don't know until we can bring this back, or another plan, back to the engineering firm, get them to do the cost estimating. Then we can come back and say, here's what it looks like. Of course, as part of the total cost is a need to resurface the entire concourse. So even though Section A, Section B are not going to be changed, it really needs to be resurfaced. So you have that cost, too. And the other thing we haven't talked a lot about is the hope for improvements that we'd make behind the stores. You can see that blue nickel, right. We're hoping to increase. So the 76 new spaces does not include anything that we can add out back, which we think we can. Maybe not to the extent that you'd see right at the very beginning, where you see Appleton Street heading behind the stores. Maybe not that many because of dumpsters in the way and snow removal needs, but we certainly can add more back there than there is today.
Counselor?
Nick, is that a raised walkway that runs across?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So one of the design points that is the same for all of these concepts is trying to traffic calm and using raised crosswalks at the various connection points right through here. So all three of these crosswalks are proposed as raised crosswalks at the moment.
Would that be kind of like when you go through Colby campus now and it's that gradual hump that's...
Yes, exactly.
But is that a raised sidewalk all the way through, or is that just a pathway between the parking?
That's a good question, and I'll take you back. That walkway exists today. It's this piece right here. So essentially, we'd be leaving the existing concrete walkway and obviously saw cutting at various joints through here, removing this area that we're not using, and try to optimize the stalls in both of these teardrop areas.
And then my other question, actually I was going to ask about the roadway behind Save-A-Lot, but beyond that, what about that parking lot that's up on Elm Street that seems really underutilized at this point? Who owns that?
I believe it's Hannaford.
Hannaford?
Yes. Yeah, Hannaford owns that.
Have we had any discussions? I mean, I'm not necessarily in favor of buying it, but maybe some discussions about, making it public parking. It seems it's really underutilized at this point. You rarely see more than a couple of cars parked up there.
Since I've started here, I've investigated a number of different areas, as has my predecessor, Greg, and I know that Andy will after me, in identifying some key areas. That lot was one that we had considered. There are various sections in and around Main Street, and I think, honestly, after this build grant project goes through, we're going to see that maybe with different traffic direction that we might be able to get some off-street parking where maybe we haven't before. So that's kind of the end goal.
And then one last thing, Mike, we discussed this today. Although it's a pretty detailed plan, it's really a concept. So while this will be sort of the overarching guiding concept of the plan, there could be some tweaks to it to maybe save some of the trees or different things like that.
Right, exactly. The red stars that you see are the trees that we expect to remove. But as Nick has reminded me, Andy has reminded me, when a contractor gets out on the scene and is going to be working with the city to maximize the stalls, there are a lot of opportunities for us to even pick up some of those trees, put them in another place, or to save them. And so I think it's a concept design, is something that's flexible and can be changed once we get out there with a contractor to do the work. Probably the ones, right, Nick, that would definitely have to be removed are the 5 down at the bottom edge of that, right there, and then the 6 or 5 or 6 in the Haynes Park. Right, that whole section there. So I think it's safe to say those will go, the bottom layer will go, but we're hoping to on that top layer there to be able to see what we could do to maintain some of those trees. They're 20 years old. They're just starting to come into their own. I don't like to see them removed either. So that, I hope, would be a priority. Is there any way we can still get close to the number of stalls we want without having to disturb all of that?
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I wanted to speak a little bit. I know that I've talked with you, Mike, a little bit about it and several other people, but I'm here to support the Parking Committee's recommendation on this option. Again, there was 3 options. This was deliberated quite lengthy over the course of our meetings with the Parking Committee, and this is a very important decision. It really does. But we were thinking in longevity. You have to look ahead from the broad perspective with the build project happening here very shortly. Phase 1, obviously, with Kennebec Water and sewage and all that starting next year, and then we're going to be looking at 2021 for real start of construction to two-way traffic. This option was the best option to the Parking Committee, again, because of the fact that we are preserving the throughway that goes through the concourse. There is a lot of, we did a lot of speculation and analytical review of the assessment of what it would be to take that out and go with other options. I mean, we could have had an option, there was an option on the table to make it look like a Walmart parking lot. Take everything out, pave it, stripe it, and not have any abutments, not have any trees, not have any green spaces, and you free up 145 spaces. A lot of people are interested in that. Even today, through my email correspondence, I've had business people downtown that are interested in that. But at the same time, what is not understood is the congestion problems that it creates with the traffic by eliminating that throughway. The throughway really helps become a reasonable alternative for people to get to Winslow and turn left instead of having to go down Temple, get onto Front Street, because that's what the reality is going to be. So we took all of those concepts into consideration. We have to present something looking into the future as a reasonable alternative for traffic to turn and go to Winslow and turn left, which would obviously, the alternative route would be through the concourse to do that. You know, having that kind of leverage with that kind of throughway is very important. This creates enough parking spaces, in our opinion, from the Parking Committee, right, Mike, as far as what's
Correct.
going to be lost on Main Street as a whole. I mean, we're looking at losing 45 to 50 spaces on Main Street during the build project, and they have to be replaced. The building that we sit in obviously has taken parking spaces away from the concourse. We are still actively talking with Colby College about the problematic issues of students parking in the concourse to a certain degree. I do believe that Colby is taking it seriously in a lot of manners, because we did get some reports back that there's a lot of more educational sessions with each incoming freshman class. And each incoming freshman class has to be, obviously with that large body of students, has to be re-educated. And to talk about why the parking is, why we have to limit them as far as parking in the concourse. But definitely, what we're looking at is trying to neutralize what we're losing on Main Street during the build. We're looking at there is going to be some sacrifice as far as trees, like Mike indicated. I have gotten some correspondence back from concerned citizens about, removing too many trees and the effects of that on the environment and things on the pavement.
There's not going to be any effects on the environment.
All the kinds of different things, but there has been some correspondence about that. But the problem, it's not necessarily a problem, but the reality of what we're talking about is that we have a real good compromise with this option, because we're going to try to limit the effect on taking away trees, and we still conserve green space. So there's still going to be ample enough parking created to offset what we're going to lose on Main Street and the throughway that helps become a reasonable alternative for people to turn left to go to Winslow. So those were some of the major concepts that we went back and forth, and I really believe, and I'm hopeful that the council will approve this, because it is the best option going forward.
Any other question? Counselor.
What's the timeline for this project?
Well, we've talked about that a lot, and our strong recommendation is let's not disturb out back until out front is somewhat taken care of, because we know the Kennebec Water District is going to be working in one lane for most of the summer. I guess our hope, Claude, would be that work out front could be done in time for something to be done in the concourse late August, September. Obviously, you can't wait too much longer than that. So if there's time at the end of the summer left in the construction season, hopefully 2020, otherwise it's going to be 2021.
So that brings me to my second question. If things get delayed with the water district, and I know that these projects almost always get delayed, that pushes back work on the concourse. Will we be tearing the concourse up at the same time that they're doing the build project in front, so that there won't be any parking whatsoever in Waterville?
That's a good question.
I think in between the water line work, just correct me if I'm wrong with your understanding, but I think in between, once the water line work is done, we could start the concourse project in early 2021 and not have a lot of other construction happening out front here yet. There's got to be a lot of other things done in that project before they actually start disturbing the street.
Yeah, so the build project has a number of different components to it. We have Front Street, Main Street, we have the College Avenue, Front Street intersection to do. We have Bridge Street, Spring Street intersection. There's a lot of work to be done there, and I think a lot of what this work will do is we're going to have to keep on top of the schedule that MDOT is proposing, and see if we can work and fit it into the way that maybe there's work that they can do on Front Street or out towards College Avenue that they could start first, and then stay away from Main Street a little bit. If it were me, I would think that they would want to get Front Street down to 201 to a point where they can transfer traffic over to it and then work their way back to Main Street. But that's a question for Ernie Martin and the coordination piece that we'll have to work through as the design unfolds.
Well, I guess my real question is, how long do you anticipate the concourse redevelopment to be?
We talked about that, and I mean, and Andy, you can chime in, but we were discussing that earlier, and Andy's background is in construction management and in scheduling. So, in talking about it, we're hopeful about a month, 2 months, depending on how we can phase it. With the work that we're showing here, you've got Area C, Area E. I mean, Area D, you could certainly cone off and get this done. Maybe this gets done first, and that's the kind of the beauty of this, of keeping the existing design, is that we don't have to block off the entire concourse as we're working on this project. We can phase it off and do D. Maybe we can do C next, and then work our way to E, just so that we're not disrupting as many parking stalls, and also to see if we can fit it in with other projects as well, with minimal disturbance.
So was one of the main advantages to this plan versus the Walmart-style lot is that you can do it piecemeal?
Absolutely.
In regards to where the money might come from, just a reminder that the city had talked about a bond issue next fall. Of course, we have an obligation for the Trafton Road rebuild, and so at some point we'll have to borrow money for that. So, and our best guess, and it is purely a guess at this point, is that we're in the $300,000 to $500,000 range. That includes resurfacing everything, which we would have had to do anyway, and we think that cost alone is $250 to $300.
Yep.
Right? So then you add in the disturbance in C, D, and E, and whatever that may add to just that resurfacing cost. And the work out back, too. The work out back of the buildings.
Councilor Coelho?
Go ahead. You move back.
Sorry.
So, when did the parking committee meet last for this?
October 10th.
And you guys still haven't met since? Like, the whole parking committee?
The parking committee submitted their recommendation, and I'll leave it to, it just came to you
No,
tonight.
we haven't had a need to meet that I know of.
Well, we met
I
in
mean,
November.
Other than the parking in front of, like,
Oh, sorry.
right here, all this contested parking that we've been having for like 6 months? No one discussed the 2-hour parking in front of like yard goods?
I'm sorry. What I meant to say was October 10th is when this was proposed and accepted by the parking committee, but Councilor Mayu is correct. November,
We did
they
meet in
did meet and
November, but we
discuss
didn't
it.
have a quorum.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, right. We had November.
I like this plan, but can we seriously just blow up the parking committee?
We can.
I mean, I don't know, I don't have a lack of a better term, but, I mean, we've been kicking the can down the road for 6 months.
Regarding,
The parking, yard goods, all of this area, and you're redesigning an entire concourse, and we're not addressing it.
In fairness, at the last meeting, I think this came up as an issue, and all these questions were asked, and there was quite a contentious conversation about it, so I don't know that it's fair to bring it back up again 2 weeks later. I think they have their marching orders, and if they don't meet after, and I think at the last meeting, what we decided was after the council gives the go-ahead on a plan for this, that the parking committee was going to get their house in order and discuss the rest of the strategy.
All right? Good with that.
Councilor, you still had some more questions.
So your answers to my other questions in terms of being able to do things piecemeal, would it make sense to set up a schedule that would stretch out over maybe a 2-year period to minimize the amount of disruption that would occur in the concourse? In other words, do maybe Section E the first thing next spring and wait to do D or C until things have cleared on the water main work.
I think your idea and concept, I think, would work. The problem might be getting a contract to extend over that period of time. When you put something out to bid, prices fluctuate. As you saw with Maine DOT's projects over the past year, a lot of the prices have been fluctuating all over the place. So it's hard to really get a good number from a contractor doing that. Not to say that we could do it.
3 times.
You'd have to almost do it 3 times, exactly. Yep.
Exactly.
Any other questions from the council?
I guess my only concern with this is when we look at this, we're going to net 76 spaces. Overall, we're going to net 30 plus because we're going to lose 40 so on here. And we're looking at an estimate. Now, if you can go back to that, you had some costs in the from like 2003 or 6 or something like that.
1996, yeah.
So in 96, this thing was, we were at 1 million. And what do we, in this particular plan here, what was the end result?
So I'll take you back to the,
I'm just wondering if the $500,000 is realistic for what we're trying to do here, and then when you look at that per space, you know, you're looking at about $6,500 a space added.
well,
Like, I don't know, from a construction, when you know, you do, per square foot, it's X dollars a building, but I don't know how that equates to parking spaces.
But you'd have to take out the resurfacing.
Yeah.
Oh, so at 300,000, so it's still 6,500, you know, like, I mean, at 376 spaces additional is about $6,000 a space. I don't know I don't know what the going rate for a space is, but it just seems to me like that could be a lot of money for a small net. If there were other options and things that we could, to get that cost down and increase parking at, you know, this one time.
the, to get to your, to answer your first question in regards to why was $1.2 million spent on this lot as we see it in 96, back to this picture in 2003. And a lot of it, honestly, had to do with some of the concrete features down through here and the creation of a lot of these green space islands and the plantings. I mean, plantings alone, you know, down on the Riverwalk, you know, we're in the tens of thousands. I mean, it's very expensive. So with the redesign as we had kind of proposed it was to try to reduce the amount of disturbance on these islands as we could. Some of them, you know, would need to be reconfigured, but again, just trying to minimize the amount of disturbance as we were tasked to consider concept plans to try to maximize the stalls, and that's what the parking committee was tasked with, and that's what we're presenting to you today.
And then just one other question, in doing this, in determining in each quadrant how many different spaces that you net, at any time, was there any discussion as to, well, in quadrant B, this will be all-day parking, or quadrant E will be 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour parking, anything like that? Is there any discussions as to, at the end game, how would this look from a time perspective?
Yeah, and I think that's a question for the parking committee. Once the design is in place to figure out exactly where those all-day parking and 2-hour parking stalls would be, not necessarily through this design, but I mean, you could certainly add signage after the fact to modify it as we do today, you know, moving signs to try to figure out if we can add more all-day parking versus 2-hour parking, and that has been discussed at the parking committee.
So was there a discussion?
There was. On the time limits?
Yeah, like where,
Yeah.
I mean, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, there was-
I mean, that's important to people, because,
Yeah,
I mean,
it was,
we see this every 3 months.
There was general discussion about the time limits, but, you know, the basis of the discussion and dialogue was the analyzation of coming down to the 3 options and picking one. And the parking committee is tasked with the task of identifying those time limits in various, once the redesign is approved. You know, that's, again, the work of you know, just like Chim and John Forty said, the work is ongoing for that, and we're going to have to determine that into the design. Once this design is approved, that's our next phase, is to decide what are the time limits for these various new parking spaces. And again, like Jay has said, and I will concur with Jay, the frustration of a lot of people on the council is, let's take care of the yard goods things for good. And that is right at the top of the list, because we cannot continue to let and allow this problematic issue to continue to fester. It is something that we have to address. Right now, the overall sphere of what we're talking about is to get an option approved, and again, the parking committee is going to go back and do those time limits.
Which would include Main Street and every other area of parking. It's not going to just include the concourse. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. When you're talking about an overall parking strategy, you can't just look at Section E and say, what do we want in there? You kind of have to look at what do we have for all of our parking? What do we have coming up with a build grant for parking? What does that look like? Some businesses want longer-term parking. A lot of businesses want us to make people pay or have a quicker turnover, because that's what's good for their business. So all those discussions, you know, have been taking place, but it is something that we have to do. But Yes.
I'm going to oppose this plan because I, quite frankly, think we're putting the cart before the horse. If we're going to rebuild the way Main Street works, the way Front Street works, I think it makes more sense to wait until we see what happens to traffic before we decide what to do with the parking. It strikes me that even though you've done a good job of coming up with options and ways to look at things, I just think that the way that traffic's going to end up being changed is going to be the main driving factor in parking in the city. We should wait and see what the traffic's going to look like before we decide how we're going to park the cars.
Any other questions or comments from the council? All right, we will open it up to the public. Is there any public commentary? Please come to the podium, tell us your name, where you live, and take 2 to 3 minutes and give us your thoughts.
How we doing, everybody? Rick Foss, Ward 5. Nick, Mike, great job. Mike, you and I have talked about this a couple of times. So we've got a plan on the table that we have no
Mr.
price
Foss,
tag
Mr.
for.
Foss.
My understanding.
Mr. Foss.
Yes.
You have to please address the chair.
Sorry.
Thank you.
My apologies. We've got a plan on the table that doesn't have a steadfast, within reason price tag. Is that correct?
Right.
Yep.
Okay. How long would it take to get that price tag, an estimate? And we all understand that prices change, but how long would it take?
The
Mike?
contract that we have with the engineering firm requires them to deliver a price and actually the design specs as soon as we give them an approved plan.
Okay.
I think they would be able to do that within the space of a month.
Yeah. That would be reasonable. Once we give them the go-ahead, they've been waiting on us to give them a concept.
Okay. We're seeing, the reason I say that is we see $1.2 million years and years and years ago. We all know that those prices have gone through the roof. If we approve this in the very near future, do we have a backout option? When the price tag comes in and we're looking at $17,000 per net stall.
So the way, this is simply approving the design.
Yep.
This is not approving any kind of spending.
Right.
So you'll actually be sitting here on the council when that vote comes up
Right.
to decide whether we're actually going to move forward and spend money on it or not.
Yep.
Now, granted, the council could shoot this down tonight and this whole thing blows up, so that's the other option
Right.
here. But this thing could go on, and it's going to continue to go on until a council votes on, has 2 votes on what to actually spend or what not to spend. So there is no vote on spending. At this point, the vote tonight is on a concept.
Right, and that's what I'm asking for, is that we can back out at a later date if
Yes.
those numbers come in too high.
Yes.
Okay, good enough. That's all I need. Thank you.
Councilor.
The only thing I would say is that the only thing that's not optional is resurfacing this parking lot at some point. I mean, redesigning it is optional, but soon we're going to need to pave this parking lot.
Right.
And certainly it makes sense, if we are going to do a redesign, it makes sense to do it when we're resurfacing the parking lot.
Keep in mind that the bids, as they come in, the city, and as we've structured the bidding process, the city has the right to reject any and all bids if they come out over budget. So you're not obligating yourself to any costs tonight.
And I would just say, if you do choose to go this redesign, I would like to take up Nick Champagne's private suggestion that we rename that Charles Street. Mr. Weber.
Yes, I'm Norton Weber. I live at First Rangeway. Assume you got my email.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Well, I think I can solve it, and so everybody else ought to be listening here. Effective immediately, have all of the Colby students park their cars where they were supposed to park them in the first place, which is up on the hill, or, as I said in the email, rather than redesign the concourse, let's redesign Hedda Falls so they can all park down there, and I think that would solve everything. You'd have all kinds of, and there's lots of empty spaces down there anyway. But the other thing is, I feel like maybe I've been cryovacked or something. I walked in and I feel like that this is already happening. Did I miss?
I
And my
think-
wife, when I told my wife on the phone, she screamed.
For the
and
concourse?
she reads the paper every day.
Huh. We just had counselors say that they're opposed to this, and there's been a lot of good discussion, so I don't know how anyone could get the impression that this is already happening.
Well, no, well, but it just feels it's more advanced than what I, Anyway,
Yeah, sure. I will say this has been a discussion for the last year, so
I see.
yeah.
Okay. Well, as you can tell by my sweater, this is probably a Levine's issue here. I go back a ways on things, but I approached the department way back about realigning the whole thing. That was back when John was chief. But anyway, we spent a lot of money. And if the reason we're spending the money is because of this building, essentially, and what's going on down here, then I would urge everybody to make sure that the folks that own this building that took away all of these parking spaces is held accountable for as much of this work as possible. So anyway, I felt like I was kind of spaced out here. But, you guys are used to that when I come up to the podium. So anyway, thank you. And thank you all for your service. I like to remember that, especially you guys back there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Phil Field, Ward 2. I think when this project was being proposed, I was still on the council, and I talked to Mike about that. And one of the things that I talked about was we have a parking problem. We don't have an environmental problem in Waterville, right? We want to create parking spaces. So it makes sense for us to try to solve the problem. Solving the problem means that when we go ahead and redesign the concourse, we maximize the spots for all the vehicles that we're going to be losing on Main Street, because all those people who park there are all going to be transferred into the concourse. Yes, we want to save the trees. We like trees, but we want to solve the problem. We don't want to be 2 years from now creating a problem today that we have to fix again in 2 years because people are complaining there's no parking spaces when we had the chance to go ahead and fix it. So this design should not be approved. The design that should be approved is one that maximizes and solves the problem that we have, which is creating enough parking spaces for people who go downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name's Dana Sennett, former city councilor and mayor. This is great. Going back to 1996, I was a freshman counselor, so I know what it's like to sit there for the first year, newly elected councilors. We were lucky in 1996. We had a clean bill of health and a blank sheet to redesign the concourse parking lot. And we also had a grant funding that was part of a contribution from, I believe the Walmart was $100,000 for a 10-year period, so it was $1 million. So we went into it with the idea that we were going to provide a safe, pedestrian-friendly, useful area for the concourse. We also didn't realize that the Morning Sentinel building had some inherent problems that we didn't, of course I worked at the Sentinel for a number of years, but we didn't realize they had buried the press in the basement and also had inkwells that we had to deal with. So just to point out, as we move forward on this project, and that there are going to be some additional things that you'll have to look at. I was very pleased to see the redesign. I also want to say that I was also part of the committee that had the Taconic statue that was approved, and that didn't work out so well. However, it was also a group of a number of interested people who came together in a timely fashion, decided that was the best use to redesign the concourse and place that statue. My son, who lives in Wyoming, understands the statue. He's teaches on an Indian reservation and sees the whole connection with the Taconic and the heritage that it brings. And you've done a good job putting it in a perfect place. My concern, though, is, I heard a grant, but I also recognize that that's probably not going to be the case. It's going to be funded by some sort of bond, and of all the major projects in the city of Waterville, I think I probably have been involved with 10 or 15 over the number of years, police station, opera house, renovations of all the schools. So you have a lot of work in front of you if you move forward with this to secure the money. And I hope, and you did say that you should be able to get a good idea on what's coming up as far as the financials. That'll be the sounding board as you move forward. Unless you get a good idea of what it's going to cost, I would take a good close look, and that I agree with the counselor over here about the timetable. It's very important to have the timetable. Wish you all good luck and Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Julian Payne, Ward 5. I think if you're spending that kind of money to leave trees in that area over parking is probably not the best investment. We actually, Maine is the second most forested state in the whole union, so you can drive down the entire, any street in Waterville and see trees right up from First Rangeway. It's a parking issue. If you're spending that kind of money, it's not the place to be a greenhouse. We have a new river path, many issues. Other than aesthetics, I would probably estimate in any given day in Waterville, one single landowner has cut more trees down in their own backyard than that entire project. It also concerns me the amount of money down the road, and I would hope you would work with the entire budget, meaning schools and all projects, because I recognize some faces here from the last school board meeting, and the bond proposed was pretty big as well. So along with this and everything else that would be needed, you could be looking at a $6 million jump in 1 year. And we've just bonded, I believe, $5 million for another project. Somewhere along the line, brakes have to be put on. The regular residents have to be protected, and all demographics. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
I'm Dick Thomas from Big Sky Lane here, and I'd like to put in just 2 cents in terms of what I like about the idea of saving some of the trees. Very much like the fact that it's really the balance is being sought between getting enough parking spaces and having enough beauty here. So, I think a Walmart parking lot is really pretty ugly. And as these trees get bigger, the impact, it's going to be just so much more beautiful. And it's nice to have a beautiful downtown area. The other thing I like about trees is the shade during heat spells. Now, 10 or 15 years from now, our heat spells may be pretty uncomfortable. And parking lots in particular are going to be absorbing all that sunlight. So if there is a possibility of having a shaded walkway part of the way into our downtown area, parkers are going to appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Counselor?
I would just say the bigger issue, it appears to me, if you want to maximize the number of parking spaces, is not the trees, it's the road that goes through the middle. And so the question is, what would that do to traffic going through downtown? What kind of problems would it create for people trying to get out of downtown? So, I mean, that's really the discussion about maximizing the parking isn't really about the trees. I don't see any problem with trying to save the trees when possible. The discussion really is about the road through the middle, correct, right, Nick? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that probably goes to Councilor Frankie's suggestion that let's wait and see what the traffic actually does and let people get used to it before you change it. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's really what you were going at.
Thank you for summarizing what I was saying.
You bet.
But that's, if I may, that's something that's 3 years away. Okay, just so we understand the timing of the bill grant. The completion deadline for the bill grant is 2024. So that's actually 4 years away. So I don't know if we can wait 4 years to resurface the concourse parking lot. That's another question.
Is it that bad?
Some sections.
Parts of it are. Certainly the road through the middle.
Councilor Mayhew?
Mike and Nick Champagne from the parking committee, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why the committee came up with keeping the throughway road through the concourse is because we had very good analysis of what traffic congestion could happen, and emergency units would have a very difficult time getting in without the throughway to those businesses in critical times. The traffic congestion without that main road throughway creates a lot of different issues and problems, and I think, Nick, you spoke to that to a certain extent. I know police and fire department were involved in some of that, but those are the reasons also why we wanted to keep the throughway for emergency personnel, traffic congestion issues, pedestrian walkway issues, countless number of things that we had analytical data that we looked at. So I can say cohesively as a committee, we did look at all those things. This is why we came up with this option.
I would just add, I know some people may have a different experience, but I'm downtown about every day. I have never not found a parking spot downtown. I might just have to walk like 50 feet. Just putting that out there. Counselor?
Mike, I know we had this discussion before, and I mean, this is sort of tangential to the discussion we're having, but where do things stand? This is also a question for Nick. Where do things stand with Silver Street when it comes to the build grant? I know that the current people were talking about keeping the flow the way it is, and I made the point that that doesn't seem to make any sense to me because your only option really coming out of the concourse, you don't want people trying to take a right across a two-way street, so most people coming out would take a left, which would mean they'd just be looping back around. They'd be stuck in an endless loop trying to get out of downtown. And so my suggestion was that you make it a right-hand turn onto Silver Street from Main Street, so that if you've come all the way down Main Street and you haven't found a place to park, you can turn into the parking lot. Where does that discussion stand?
So DOT still is considering it and kind of circled it as an area in question. I think we've nailed down the Temple Street is still remaining two-way. The one question was Silver Street, and I believe that they were kind of kicking the can on it towards the end to see if it's something that we can look at in the future. Doesn't necessarily need to be made with the build grant project. So
It doesn't really have any substantial impact on traffic flow, so DOT said it's really entirely a city decision if you want to reverse the flow on Silver Street from what it is today.
the only addition to the Silver Street intersection was a bump out design for a crosswalk, and that will not affect the use of Silver Street at all.
Any other questions or comments? All right, council, I'm going to move to a vote. All in favor? All opposed? That was 4 in favor, 3 opposed. Yep.
Wasn't it 3 in favor and 4 opposed?
No, Flavia put her hand up at the end on the in favor.
Okay.
So it was 4 in favor, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
3 opposed.
It's quite all right. You let me know when you're ready, Patty.
Well done.
All right, we are on ordinance 224, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
An ordinance providing for amendment to the zoning ordinance.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Next is ordinance 225, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
An ordinance providing for amendment to the zoning ordinance.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
What brought this about?
The sign change. There's a business on Water Street across from the Hathaway, Pete's Pig, I think what's called, set back off Water Street a little bit. But because it's in the downtown, so-called downtown business district, it's prohibited from having a directional sign. So the owner was saying, if I have someone on Elm Street at the corner of Elm and Sherwin Street, I'd like to have one of those blue signs on a post there saying, my business, take a right on Sherwin, down Sherwin over to Water. He's really prohibited from having that. And I think that, in my opinion, and I think Planning Board felt the same way, it's kind of an antiquated rule that we still had in the zoning ordinance. Because the downtown business district extends so far, it's Sherwin Street.
Yeah. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor? Next, ordinance 226, 2019.
An order providing for acceptance of donation, Operation Hope. Be it hereby ordered by the Waterville City Council, acting as municipal officers, that the City Council accept a donation of $15,000 from Raleigh in support of the city's Operation Hope program and authorize the Chief of Police to expend said funds for program activities.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I see Mike at the podium again.
I'm very happy to be able to get up and say a few words about this, because it really is, the donation is an opportunity. It's good news, certainly, and it's an opportunity for hope for some people. And the two people sitting out back there have been involved in Operation Hope now for almost 3 years. Started in January 2017, and I'm not sure a lot of people in the city recognize what the police department has done over those 3 years. Of course, not just Joe and Bill, Bonnie, but people who work with them in providing some help, whatever help they can, to people that are sick and in need. So I'm going to ask them to explain a little bit more about their program.
Good evening, councilors, mayor. My name's Joe Massey. For the new councilors, probably I don't think I've met before. Chief of the Waterville Police Department, Bill Bonney, he's the deputy chief. This donation from Raleigh, this $15,000 donation, $15,000 donation, is going to go a long ways in sustaining the HOPE program. And as you know, the program is administered by the police department and allows us to provide treatment for those people who are suffering from opioid addiction. And the program, as Mike said, has been in existence for 3 years and totally funded by donations and fundraisers and other activities we do to support that. There's no taxpayer dollars involved. And so we find ourselves in a fundraising business, which isn't traditional law enforcement, but we realize the need for us to do that. The implementation of HOPE was our response to the opioid crisis right here locally. Overdose deaths, overdoses, how it affected individuals and their families, how it affected our community. And so we got the idea, Bill and I, from attending a conference in 2016 where we got an overview, a presentation of Operation Hope. And we realized this is really what we need in our community. I mean, we have to step outside the box and do something beyond our traditional role in the community to help combat this crisis that we're facing, not just in our community, but across the country. And so when we got back from that conference, I asked Bill, I said, do you think you could model that to fit our needs? And so he's the one that's really kind of the architect of this Operation Hope program, which has been tremendously successful. That includes the policies that go along with the fundraising events, the golf tournaments, the concerts, presentations, anything we can do to raise money to keep Operation Hope so that when individuals come to the police department seeking help for their opiate addiction, we have the resources and the means to, on the spur of the moment, get them lined up for a treatment facility and get transportation, personal needs, and all those things that are required to send someone out of state, if that's the case, to receive that help. So what we'd like to do tonight is show you a very quick slide. I'd like to have Bill go through it to show you just how successful our Operation Hope program has been here in the community. Some real success stories and what it's meant for those people who are addicted, not only the people who are addicted, but again, families, co-workers, how it affects the community. And it's been tremendously successful. So with that, I'll let Bill step up and go through a quick slide presentation for you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. For those that don't know me, I'm Bill Bonney, Deputy Chief of Police at the Waterville Police Department. And this program is something that we are all very passionate about. HOPE stands for Heroin, Opiate, Prevention, Effort. And it's really a three-pronged approach to fighting the opiate epidemic. Educate, our school resource officer is in the schools delivering programming to the students so that we can hopefully help prevent the next generation of people suffering from opiate use disorder. We also aggressively enforce Maine's drug trafficking laws, targeting source-level suppliers, because those are the people that are bringing this poison into our community. And finally, and the biggest part, as the chief was talking about, is the treatment piece, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Could I have the next slide, please? Since 2017, Operation Hope has seen 167 participants. We're currently working with our angels, that's what we call the volunteers that volunteer with this program, to determine a degree of success for the program. And hopefully, very soon, we'll have numbers to look at that. But it's really not about numbers. If you could move to the next slide. Chief Massey and I, when we were first developing this program, said if we save one person, it will have been worth it. And this is a message that we got from Jason Tingley, and I am going to read it just because it's so impactful. This was just last week on 12/12/19. And he sent us a message on our department Facebook page that said, I just want to take a minute and say thank you to Waterville PD and Operation Hope. December 8, 2018, I walked in the front doors of the station wanting to die. I was beaten and broken and wanted it to end. You guys didn't look at me or treat me as some worthless junkie. Instead, I was offered a chance at a new life. You guys sent me to Virginia on a 28-day scholarship after 6 days of absolute hell and detox. Thanks to you guys giving me a chance and believing in me, I celebrated 1 year 100% clean this past Sunday. No weed, no alcohol, no Suboxone, no methadone, no nothing. Because of some amazing people running an amazing program, we have hope today. I still live in Virginia today and have since met many people that have come down through you guys. A couple I have directed to you myself. Because you guys believing in me and taking a chance, I have my life back. I have relationships with my children and family again, all because of you and Operation Hope. Please don't ever stop what you guys are doing. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for believing in me and giving me this chance. Jason Tingley. And this is, when we get these messages, it's incredibly impactful because in a very real and literal sense, we're helping to save people's life. And you don't just get to do that every day. So it makes a huge difference. Could I have the next slide? This is a local girl, Emily Bucher, young woman, actually. And she sent us this message in July of last year. I want to thank you for my new life. I have seen a few of my friends follow my lead and come get help. I hope more come forward and ask for it. I'm grateful for the Waterville Police Department, and Operation Hope could not have done this without your help. Thank you. If you look at the photos there, the one on the left was a recent booking photo that we had of Miss Bucher before she went into the treatment program. She looks like someone suffering from opiate use disorder. Her eyes are dim, there's no light in them, she's sad, her face is drawn. If you look at the picture on the right, that was a picture on her Facebook page when she sent that message, and she agreed to us using this, and this was actually in the Morning Sentinel. She has light and life in her eyes, she has a smile on her face, and color has returned. And so for us, this is what makes it all worth it. And the next slide, thank you. But it's not cheap. As the chief mentioned, this program is funded by grants and private donations. We do not use taxpayer dollars to send people to treatment. And it's been my experience both when I was doing the community policing position in the South End and with this program that when you work with the community to develop programs like this and they take ownership in it, it creates much more success. And our community, including the city manager, including the council, and all the folks out in the community that have been willing to donate, have certainly had buy-in to this program in a very literal sense. Emily and Jason, there are but a few of the many success stories, but this grant that we're here with you tonight before the council from Raleigh will make a difference in the lives of many, many people seeking help from our Operation Hope program. Thank you.
Just want to say a couple words. You know, we live in a time where half our country is dying from this stuff. And we have babies being born addicted to this stuff every day. And our government, our state, and federal government have failed us miserably. Because Narcan is a Band-Aid. And I just want to thank you for what you're doing. And there are a few things that make me more proud to be mayor than this. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words too. I want to commend you, both of you, the police department, for what you do. Operation Hope is one of those community programs. The best word to say it is priceless, because that's exactly what it is. You guys do give hope. The angels and volunteers that work with you guys through this, everybody that is seated here has members of family, relatives, friends that have been touched by these addictions. And I certainly can say God bless you guys and your angels and what you have done for this community, because this is one of those critical areas that, again, like the mayor said, you know, has not been addressed. There's failure everywhere. But when you see stuff like this on the screen, it just, you know, through prayers, through you know, coming together and organization and just being committed, having a passion for this, I commend all of you.
Just a technical question. Does the council have to approve every donation that comes into the HOPE program?
Only if they're above a certain amount.
Is it 10,000?
$10,000 amount. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly.
Ian Finch, Ward 6. I'm a data analyst, so I have a couple data questions. There were 167 participants, and do we know how many of them were placed in treatment facilities?
We're working on coming up with the success rate and numbers. One of the difficult things with coming up with numbers very early on in the program is they don't tell you much. So we've had 167 total participants. We have had some very good success stories, but we are still in the process of actually determining what the actual success rate for the program is.
And then is there a list of which programs scholarships go to? I mean, there was the 28-day scholarship in Virginia. Like, is there a list of the facilities that we are sending people to, or is it just more of a first come, first serve, open bed, doesn't matter how much it costs, sort of
Well,
program?
cost is always an issue, and open beds is just as challenging to get as providing the cost for them. So we actually partner with Perry, which is the police youth recovery initiative, where there are over 300 facilities that organization is able to supply us with. So we can take a look at those, and obviously we try to determine which ones are the most, you know, financially worth sending those folks to. The closest ones, the cheapest, the less expensive for us to send them, whether that's airfare or some other modes of transportation. So again, it just depends what's available.
Then I guess my next question is, how far will $15,000 go? Like, what's the average cost per person for treatment?
It varies, so it's very difficult to answer that. The particular place that the two folks that we were talking about there, when we send people to that facility, it's right around $1,000 if we don't get a scholarship. We always work to get scholarships. We have travel expenses that we have to consider when we have to fly them out, so that adds some additional funds. So again, it varies. It can be anywhere. One of the things that we always look for also is family members that are willing to assist. We don't spend the money lightly. We look for people that can help them out, and then we give them the money that they need to get to treatment. It could be $600. It could be $3,000. We try to limit it to each person, though, so that we can help as many people as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor? Thank you. Resolution 227, 2019.
A resolution providing for amendment to airport lease. Be it resolved by the Waterville City Council acting as municipal officers that the current lease between the city and the airport be amended as shown on the attached. And I would point out that we need to make an amendment to this to change the airport to Airlink. Is that correct, Mike?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to make that amendment?
Move to adopt. A motion to amend to
Airlink Academy.
Airlink Academy.
Is there a second?
Second, yep.
All in favor of the amendment?
And I'll move the resolution as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
And discussion. Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor? Moving on to counselor updates. Are there any counselor updates this week? Next is community notes. Community notes is a time where if anybody, counselor update.
Is this an appropriate moment to bring the planning board issue?
Oh,
to,
yes,
up?
please.
Yep.
Yep. Can I get a motion to waive cloture?
I'd like to move to waive cloture.
Second.
All in favor?
Good.
And can we move the resolution?
Would you like me to read it, or?
So you have before you that proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance, which is the subject of the waiving of the cloture. It's in regards to an item that came up in the planning board meeting last night and was approved.
Yes.
So we need her to read it.
Okay, we need you to read it.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
An ordinance providing for amendment to the zoning ordinance.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just quickly, the Billy and Beverage have done good work at identifying an issue where the Waterville zoning code is in conflict with federal law. And this amendment brings us into compliance with federal law. It's a matter of essentially First Amendment freedom of religion law, and without going into all the details of that, I think it's a good idea for us to be in compliance with federal law.
I'd say probably so.
Yes.
Any other discussion on this? No? All in favor? Great, thanks. Thank you, Counselor. All right, we went through Counselor updates. Community notes, if anybody has something they'd like to speak or comment on or let us know about something that was not on the agenda, now would be the time to do it. You have 3 minutes. Please tell us your name, where you live, what you have to say.
Julian Payne, Ward 5. I'd just like to thank you, Mayor, for appointing Neil Patterson. I've known Neil for quite a few years, and I think he'll be an asset to the planning board. And I'd like to say goodbye to Nick Champagne. I can say it now that he's leaving. First of all, we were friends, and then he was the city councilor for Ward 5, and then city engineer. So he'll be missed. I think he was a great asset to the city. So good luck in the future.
Thanks.
And I would just like to thank Chief, too, for all the work you do. I looked under the Christmas tree today, and I saw so many gifts, and I don't like one person that my wife bought a gift for. So I will say that I will get a check out to you by the end of the week for Project Hope for all the work you do for Christmas. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Anybody else for community notes?
Mayor, if I may, the Charter Commission had its organizational meeting this week, and they set a date for a public hearing, which is required by state statute. The date is set for January 8th, which is Wednesday, in this location. Members of the public are invited to attend to give their feedback or input on how they feel the changes to the charter that were made in 2015 are working out, if there are other changes that they would like to see considered, or if there are things that they'd like to see not changed. So people will be given an opportunity to speak at that time.
Thank you.
It's at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Mike, manager's report.
All right. You're not going to time me, are you, Patty?
Yeah,
We,
but it's-
especially you.
Yes.
Here we go.
2 minutes.
Go ahead.
2
Mike.
minutes. Well, then I better get the two most important things done first. I want to also thank Nick for his service to the city. His last day is Friday. And if you wanted to join us Thursday afternoon at 5 at the Proper Pig, we'll be hopefully giving him a proper send-off. But he's certainly, I was very concerned when Greg left with all of his institutional knowledge, but this fellow picked it up and never lost a step and has been a great addition to the city. We'll miss him, but you're not far away, right? I won't be too far away. You're not going to be too far away. Right. The second note of thanks for me, certainly, and I know a lot of you feel that way too, is Councilor Coelho's last meeting tonight. And
Yeah.
as we said, we always enjoy you stopping at City Hall, so please don't stop that.
Oh, I won't be going anywhere.
You're usually good for a few laughs.
You just work right around the corner.
Yeah.
Like, right around the corner. Right. Certainly, I don't want to forget to mention that Andy McPherson
Welcome.
is our newest employee, taking Nick's place. Andy started last Monday. He's got, take the mic for just a minute and tell us just a little bit.
Professional engineer. I've been in the construction industry for about 38 years. Glad to be here. I was on the Hallowell City Council for 12 years. I was a mayor of Hallowell for 1 year, so I'm pretty familiar with what goes on here. And Nick's been a big help. Hopefully I can fill his shoes. And I tell him, I used to look like him too. And after another 20 or 30 years, your hair grows back. So it's not all despair out there. You know, so. Anyway,
God, that was fun.
glad to be here.
He'll fit right in.
Yeah, I like that.
He will fit right in. Talking to Council Morris, we talked about the ambulance committee and the idea of adding some members. So we wanted to mention that tonight and put the word out. We'll also put it on our website, Facebook page.
Good. I hope you consider John Levesque. I know he's very interested and also very knowledgeable.
Yes.
And he's reached out, so I know we've...
John Levesque?
John Levesque.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's someone I would hope you consider.
All right.
I second that.
All right. Okay. I got 18
Yeah,
seconds
18
left.
seconds, so.
Oh, he is being timed.
I wasn't kidding.
That's it for me.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Wait. We have
Oh.
hang on. We need another motion for
Oh, I'm
an executive session concerning real estate negotiations.
Motion to go into executive session for real estate negotiations at Head of Falls.
Second.
Merry Christmas, everybody.